Pneumatica Book 1, by Aaron Wilburn and Aaron Knight, The Frank Cole Sequence. Chapter 2, Section 2, 6 months ago. At first, James came home excited every day, but as the months went by, that changed, Sandra continued. Over these last few weeks, by the time he gets home, he's irritable and rude. He's exhausted all the time. He comes home, eats, bathes, then goes right to bed. His sleep is terrible. He wakes up in the middle of the night screaming from nightmares, but when I ask him what's going on, he just cries and holds me. He won't tell me why, maybe can't tell me. I think Biodyne is doing something to my son, Frank, and I don't know how to get him out. For nearly 2 minutes, Sandra broke. She let go of my hands and covered her face. The tears came then. They weren't wailing sobs, but quiet things that she struggled to contain. I wanted nothing more than to hug her, but I knew the gesture wouldn't be welcome, at least not yet. So I waited for her to regain control. When she finally did, it was obvious she had activated some sort of image filter. She looked far too perfectly composed, with no evidence of redness or swelling around her eyes. I could still hear it in her voice, though, which was still thick with tears, but she pressed on. I need your help. You have credentials and a reputation that would allow you to ask questions that I can't ask. You've even worked a few cases for Biodyne employees before. You might be able to get access. I need to know what's going on with my boy. I didn't really need to think about it. I already considered Sandra to be one of the strongest, kindest people I had ever met, even though I had never known her as more than the voice and operator of the life care bot for Pops. Still, we had spoken often. We had talked about things that brought us joy and aggravation, hobbies, music. I had seen the way she navigated caring for Pops on his worst days, the ability she had to stand up to him during his worst moods with humor and pride, and then turn around to encourage him lovingly when his moments of sharp lucidity returned. The trauma this was causing her had to not only be real but devastating, to be getting this level of reaction from her. Of course, Sandra, of course I'll help. Present day. Frank paused the hollow again, removed the shades, and rubbed his temples. Ever since he had been forced to remove the implants, the glasses had become necessary to access the meta. Still, even they strained his eyes after a while. He concentrated on the image of Sandra hiding behind her hands, focusing on her in that moment as she had tried to force back the tears. All of that first meeting had taken place in the meta, but the whole experience had felt true, heavy with the unconscious weight that reality has. Frank recalled the quality of that conversation. It was entirely possible that Grimm was just excellent at her job and had created an exquisitely realistic setting, but he didn't think that was the only factor. Frank focused on the memory of Sandra and slipped off his gloves. With his bare right hand, he took an old, ornate ring out of the inner pocket of his coat. It was gold, 3 strands woven together, then opening up into a basket of fine gold threads. The threads held a single perfect pearl. He grasped the ring and concentrated, eyes firmly shut, the image of Sandra in that distant moment held firmly in his mind. He felt his hands heat up, and a light that he saw even through his closed eyelids shone from him for just a moment. When Frank's eyes opened once more, he saw that same moment in time, but overlaid with 2 other images. He was observing from the outside, not from his own viewpoint. He saw himself in the cafe, watching Sandra hide her face and fight to control her emotions. He saw himself sprawled in the suspension chair in the private cabin of the Bullet, hurtling on its way to Dallas. Most importantly, he saw Sandra reclining gracefully in her own suspension rig in her Biodyne apartment. The first thing he noticed was how real the central image remained. Despite the fact that he recognized that he and Sandra had both been accessing the meta at the time, the meeting itself had a sense of reality that was just as clear. Frank noted that detail, marking that it matched his sense of things at the time. No matter how it had occurred, there was as much truth to this interaction with Sandra as if they had actually physically met. Having taken that in, Frank tuned out the other layers and concentrated on Sandra's overlay.